Shalom, shalom, brothers and sisters. Shabbat shalom. This is the Sabbath, the Dragon, and the Lamb part 2. We left off in part 1 when Lucifer's rebellion in heaven converted into Satan's rebellion in the Garden of Eden. And then we saw that the origin of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet of Revelation chapter 16, verses 13 through 14, was in heaven. And it also got converted and transferred to the Garden of Eden, which was the first kingdom that Satan attacked on earth. So Genesis chapter 3 verse 4, Then the serpent said to the woman, You will not surely be unalived, for Yahweh knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like Yahweh, knowing good and evil. Now we can break this down in the Hegelian dialectic, which is taking the thesis, adding an antithesis, and coming up with a synthesis. So the thesis was the tree of life. Yahweh told Adam and Eve only to eat of the tree of life, not to eat, or to eat of every tree and the tree of life, but not to eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So that was the thesis. That was the knowledge of Yahweh. That's what Yahweh, that was the command of Yahweh. The thesis, that's the thesis. Now we here see the antithesis, which is the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet with Satan. So now Satan is saying, For God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like Yahweh, knowing good and evil. So now when Eve is hearing the antithesis, she already heard the thesis. The thesis is what Yahweh told her. Now she's hearing the antithesis. And when she heard the antithesis, when she accepted it and ate of the tree, verse 6, So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. So just like when Lucifer rebelled in heaven, it inevitably led him into the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. So now, when Eve makes that decision, when Adam and Eve makes that decision to eat of the tree of life, the tree of garden, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and accept the antithesis, it inevitably led to the synthesis, which is the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet, and his doctrine, which is an entirely different doctrine in opposition to what Yahweh said in the tree of life. So now it's starting to unfold. The same method that he used in heaven is the same method that he used in the Garden of Eden. The dragon, the beast, and the false prophet, the Hegelian dialectic, taking the thesis, implementing his antithesis, and coming up with a synthesis, an entirely new doctrine, which is what Isaiah says, that he wants to exalt his throne above the stars of God, implementing his antithesis and coming up with an entirely new way, which is rebellion. So Genesis chapter 2, verses 2 through 3, we see this happening in the Garden of Eden. That's why the Sabbath is so important, brothers and sisters, because the Sabbath was given before sin, before Abraham, before Israel, to humanity, to spiritual Jerusalem. It was given in heaven. So Satan's attack, it introduced doubt in the word of Elohim. Because remember, he wanted to exalt his throne above Yahweh Elohim, and his ways above Yahweh Elohim, above the stars of the north. And we uncovered that the sides of the north was symbolic for the word of God. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High on the farthest sides of the north. So that's why the Sabbath is important, because it introduced doubt in the word of Elohim, and the Sabbath was the seal of Yahweh's word. Genesis chapter 3 verse 1, Has Elohim indeed said? So this is the antithesis of Satan. This is what the foundation of what he works on. The first deception targeted the authority of Yahweh's word, and the Sabbath is the weekly sign of that authority. Now we're going to talk about Babylon, Babel, the organized rebellion, which is number 3. So first in heaven, then the Garden of Eden, now in Babylon. Genesis chapter 11 verses 4. So when we go to Genesis chapter 11 verse 4, we can see the story of Babylon. Genesis chapter 11 verse 4. And they said, Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad the face of the whole earth. Explanation. Babel equals organized apostasy. humanity trying to reach heaven without Yeshua, without obedience, without surrender. So we see this false system of worship, the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. The dragon is Satan himself. The beast is Babylon, Babel, the Tower of Babel, and the false prophet is what they just said. Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad. So now you still see the Hegelian dialectic. You still see the doctrines of Satan being, or Lucifer being exemplified in the Tower of Babel. Now we're beginning to see the specifics and the details of his complexity. Because noticing the simplicity of the gospel, it causes you to know, to make what Lucifer has made complex. It's so simple. So simple. That's why Yeshua said that you must inherit the kingdom like a child. Because when you have that humility and you accept it like a child, you see the complexity of all that's happening. And it's really not even that complex. So all false religion flows from Babel, from this origin. Really, we see it happen in the Garden of Eden. But the Garden of Eden was like heaven, because when war broke out in heaven, it was in a state of rest. Just like the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden was in a state of rest. Satan caused a rebellion in heaven and on earth, through other agents, through the angels, and then through Adam and Eve. But it was originally, the origin of it was through him. So now we see the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel is not in a state of rest. We just had Genesis 6. We just had the flood. So the world is not in a state of rest. So now it's in a state of unrest. So now we're beginning to see the origin outside of the context of Yahweh, because man has moved from the east. When Adam and Eve left the Garden of Eden, they moved eastward. When Cain unalived Abel, he moved eastward. When Shem, Ham, and Japheth, after the flood with Noah, Ham uncovered his father's nakedness, he moved eastward. So now we're beginning to see, we're moving from a state of rest to a state of unrest. As the more that we move east, the more we leave the rest, and we see that it's not. So that's why the Sabbath is important. That because the Sabbath was that rest, it was the seal and the sanctification of the law, of resting with Yahweh, of being one with Yahweh. So we're going to uncover Babylon. We're going to uncover the doctrines and the origins and the specificities and the details of Babylon. Because once we study this, we can see how it went through the historicity of the timeline of man, through Medo-Persia, through Greece, through Rome, and now in the United States of America, which is what all the secret societies are founded and established upon. They're established upon this false doctrine, based upon the Hegelian dialectic, based upon the doctrines of Ham, based upon the doctrines of Cain, based upon the doctrines of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which was introduced from Satan, which first had its origin in heaven in the form of Lucifer. So it's mind-boggling how you can see the transition and the historicity of the Antichrist and his false workings. Revelation chapter 14 verse 8. Babylon is fallen because she has made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. This is the same Babylon of the last days, which is what we just talked about. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and then the United States of America. And we're going to uncover that according to prophecy in the toes, that United States of America is the toes of Daniel, where clay and iron would not mix. The United States of America is symbolic for the clay. Rome is symbolic for the iron, which is where you have church and state not mixing because they cannot mix. So we're going to get down into the specificities and the details of that. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Let me know what you think, Lloyd Pause family. Shalom, shalom.